2024. A good year for some, a bad year for others, but an all-around great year for horror movies. So join me as I review my top 10 horror movies of 2024. Hi, I'm Heather, and this is Black Cat Archives, my channel where I review all things horror, mystery, suspense, thriller, and more. If that sounds like something that might be of interest to you, then please stick around and let's get started. 2024 was really an exceptional year for horror movies. And despite my obsession watching them, I think there are still quite a few outstanding ones that I have missed. So if there are any that you feel like are missing from this list that should be there, that's probably why. So I'll try to make this video as spoiler-free as I can, but I'm gonna be honest, I'm really kind of bad at it. So I'm gonna try to edit myself the best I can. But if you're the kind of person that likes to go into the movie with a clean slate, I would say to skip ahead any of the movies that you haven't seen in this video, because there is a chance that I might give more spoilers than I'm to, and I'm sorry. So without any further ado, let's get into my list. Number 10 is Cuckoo. Cuckoo was one that I kind of heard a lot of hype about, and when I actually saw the movie, I was not disappointed. So Cuckoo follows 17-year-old Gretchen, who has to leave her home in America to come and live with her estranged father and his new wife and daughter. The town is this little German alpine town where there is a resort that's at the center of everything. And the owner of that resort is Herr König, played by Dan Stevens, who does a great job in this creepy mad scientist sort of role. Strange things start happening in the town. The town is plagued by these weird noises that come from the woods, and Gretchen basically has to unravel the mystery, which happens to be closely connected to her own family. This movie was so inventive in so many ways, the use of sound design and light and shadow. So if you're looking for something that's a little different, but also very well executed, I definitely would recommend checking out Cuckoo. Number 9. Coming in at number 9 is It's What's Inside from Netflix. So this is one that I had no idea anything about until it popped up on my suggested movies to watch on Netflix. And I just pressed play because I'm often doing that whenever I see a horror movie, kind of no matter what it is. And in this case, it was a very pleasant surprise. Now, again, this is in the trailer and it happens about like 20 minutes in. So if you're somebody who really doesn't want to know anything about a movie, then maybe skip ahead. But the premise of this one is this group of friends in their 20s get together for a pre-wedding party for one of the people in the group. And they have a friend, Forbes, who is sort of estranged from the group, that shows up with this mysterious suitcase. So Forbes opens this suitcase and explains to them that this is a machine that will allow them to switch bodies with each other. So of course they do this, and existential horror ensues. And there are many twists and turns, and it sort of reminded me a little of Bodies, Bodies, Bodies from 2022. It's a total mind-bending psychological nightmare. And also props to the actors who essentially had to play multiple characters and did so very well. If you missed it and you have a Netflix subscription, like definitely go check it out because it was highly unexpected and worthwhile. Number 8 goes to Oddity. So this is one that came out like several this year on my list from IFC Films and Shudder. Essentially, there's a man and woman. The man, I believe he's like a doctor, or he works like late night shifts. He and his wife have just bought this rural country home to renovate. Since he's off working nights, she's often left alone at the home. So she winds up murdered. A year later, her twin sister, who's blind and clairvoyant, shows up. She also runs their family's oddities shop, and she's there to investigate the death of her sister because she just doesn't feel like she knows the whole story. And she shows up with this incredibly creepy wooden mannequin. And so that's where I can't really go into further detail other than it's like murder mystery with these supernatural twists and turns. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of this movie. I enjoyed the tension. It's definitely one I would check out if you're into murder mysteries or the supernatural. It just has a very creepy, unsettling tone. It's not like the scariest movie I've ever seen, which I thought was interesting because I saw a lot of things talking about how scary it was. But to me, it was more so just eerie and creepy, and it had a lot of really great like atmospheric qualities. Number 7 on my list is Stopmotion. So this is another one from IFC Films. I remember seeing, I think, just like the cover for it and just knew like it was something that I needed to see. I think it was like this little creepy looking stop motion animation doll. So the premise of stop motion is Ella is this stop motion animator who works with her mother, who is a renowned stop motion animator who has lost the use of her hands. So Ella is essentially like trying to fulfill her mother's artistic vision, and her mother is not the nicest person to work with. In fact, she's pretty awful. Early on in the film, her mother dies. So as Ella further pursues her mother's artistic vision and trying to complete her mother's work, things around her start to unravel and the lines between reality and fantasy are blurred to great effect using these little creepy looking stop motion dolls. But it's really an exploration of how you can destroy and devour yourself through the grieving process. I would say it's a more disturbing psychological horror, more of an art house style horror film. So if that sounds like something that would be up your alley, I would definitely recommend checking it out. In sixth place, we have MaXXXine, which is the third installment and final installment in the X trilogy from Ty West. X was an homage to 1970s slasher movies where these adult film stars go to make an adult film in this barn that they rent out, and slasher antics ensue. And MaXXXine was our heroine from that film. Then Pearl was the second installment, which was totally tonally different from the first movie, X, but it also was a period horror movie, and it took place during World War I, which I found to be a very interesting concept because I don't think I've ever seen any other horror movies that get into the World War I period. So Pearl is one of the characters from X, but this is her backstory. And so she is a bit on the crazy side. Like, if you've seen it, then you know the beginning, one of the first scenes, the goose, like, I don't know if I'll ever get that out of my head. As soon as I saw that, I knew the kind of movie I was in for, and I was all in. Played by Mia Goth, of course, who was also in X and is MaXXXine. Pearl is absolutely a fascinating character to watch. She, like MaXXXine, wants to pursue a career on the silver screen and wants fame and all things that go with it. MaXXXine is the final installment in the X trilogy. So we pick up with MaXXXine after the events of X have taken place. And now she is in Los Angeles. It's 1985, and she is breaking out of the adult film industry and getting into Hollywood. So she lands a role in an acclaimed horror director's movie. And then things start to kind of take a turn as her past starts to catch up with her. And this is all over the backdrop of 1985 Los Angeles and the Night Stalker. So it definitely has that 80s nostalgia serial killer element going for it. And I thought this was an incredibly well done final installment to the X trilogy. And I just look forward to whatever Mia Goth is in next. In fifth place, we have Smile 2. So oftentimes, sequels really don't live up to their predecessors. But in this case, it was a rare situation where, despite the fact that I really liked Smile when it came out, and I actually genuinely thought it was a terrifying movie, Smile 2, I liked even more. So one of the coolest things about the Smile movies has to be their marketing, right? So like the first Smile, they did the whole thing where they had like creepy people smiling in the background in these like sporting events and stuff like that, just like sitting there smiling. And so it sort of like blurred this line between like, is it real? Like, are the Smile people real? That sort of thing. And then Smile 2, they had a really cool thing where you could watch like the first, I think, 10 minutes of the movie, but you had to like have your camera on your computer or your phone or whatever you were watching it on, and it watched you to make sure you stayed smiling the whole time as you watched it. So of course I took that bait and I watched the first 10 minutes and I was totally in. If you haven't seen Smile, it's got a premise sort of similar to It Follows or The Ring, where there is a curse or entity, however you want to look at it, that attaches itself to people, and then they have a limited amount of time to shirk the curse before they meet their demise. In Smile 2, It Follows Sky Riley, who's a pop star who has hit rock bottom and she's trying to make a comeback. She's gotten sober and she makes a decision that causes her to inherit the Smile curse or entity. What made Smile 2 a little more interesting than the original Smile was the fact that the protagonist was a pop star, and it was like juggling the smile curse with fame and her trying to make a comeback, because the curse sort of makes people seem insane and kind of like lose control of their lives. So right as she's at this point in her life where she's trying to make a comeback and seem really put together, everything starts going downhill for her, and there's really nothing she can do to control it. Smile 2, definitely worth checking out. It was one of the scary movies I saw this year. It was one I saw in the theater as soon as I could, which brings me to number 4. Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? By now, we've all heard this tagline from The Substance, which really made waves this year. Demi Moore plays Elizabeth Sparkle, and she's like a huge star. As she turns 50, she's taken out to be fired by her longtime producer, who is played amazingly, hilariously by Dennis Quaid, who chewing that shrimp. That is an image I'll never get out of my mind.
It stops.
So she's fired, and then she is subsequently crushed. She has lost everything that had any meaning to her in her life. Her life is pretty empty outside of her show and her fame. So she turns to this underground drug called the Substance that offers an opportunity to create a newer version of herself, which comes with a stipulation that there has to be the balance that must be followed. No surprise, things become imbalanced, and hilarity, horror, body horror, real serious Cronenberg-esque body horror ensues. So I definitely had some like laugh out loud moments in the theater when I saw this because of the just grotesque nature of the prosthetics and in a good way. The body horror elements of it, especially like that third act, was just so much fun. So The Substance really did a great job of having the cinematography reflect the themes of the film. Our obsession with beauty and youth and fame in Hollywood, and as a result, the rest of our society. And so there were so many close-ups of butts, you know. If you've seen the Call on Me video, it's basically just like a 2-hour version of that in many ways, which I don't think anyone's complaining about. It was incredibly well shot. It knew the style it was going for, and it went all in, and it did it to great effect. So I believe the director is Coralie Forgia. If I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sincerely sorry. And a breakout performance for Margaret Qualley, who is the newer version of Elizabeth Sparkle. And kudos to Dennis Quaid for really bringing the comedy, you know? Demi Moore just absolutely nailed it. Such a raw, visceral performance from her. She just won the Golden Globe, and this is one of those funny moments where I remember that Golden Globes and the Oscars and all that still don't really take horror movies seriously. So it's under the comedy and musical category. But, you know, that's also to say, like, Substance was one of those where it was almost like more like sci-fi dark comedy, really, like almost like more like a Brazil, which like has horror elements, but it's not to me like a full-on horror movie. It was a wonderful exploration into how far will we go and how much will we destroy ourselves to attain these things, youth and beauty. Now, for a lot of people, I think this was in their number 1 slot this year, and would have been mine if not for these 3 other movies. Number 3 is Late Night with the Devil. This was another one that I just sort of turned on because I saw that it was like, oh, another new horror movie to watch. Let's give it a go. And I just absolutely loved it. It stars David Dastmalchian as Jack Delroy, who is like a late night show host. It's 1977, and he is like basically a rival to Johnny Carson, although he's never been as successful as him. And the way the film is presented, it's all as though we're watching the late night show, even to the effect that it's in like 4:3 aspect ratio, like an old TV show from the 70s, and it's presented in that kind of grainy 1970s TV format. And when we're not seeing the show as the audience would see it, we're seeing like backstage or behind the scenes things of what's kind of going on. Those are in black and white. So I really thought that was a cool storytelling device that made it feel really immersive. So basically, this is a Halloween special this night, and he has a skeptic, a clairvoyant, and a possessed girl, and they're going to attempt to commune with the devil. It's all about how far are you willing to go? What are you willing to do to achieve fame? You're also left wondering whether what you've seen is real or fantasy. So I won't say any more, but this one was a sleepy little guy that I didn't really hear anything about. And like I said, it just sort of popped up for me, and I gave it a watch, and it's in my top 3. It was a great performance by David Dasmalchian, I hope I'm not completely butchering his name, who I'd seen in like other more supporting roles, and he really did an excellent job as the front man in this. And it's almost like his real life where he's always kind of playing these side roles, and now he finally has a starring role in this. Sort of echoes the character Jack Delroy, who's just trying to be like the #1 late night talk show guy, but he may have to do some things that sacrifice his everlasting soul in order to achieve that. Hint, hint. Anyway, yeah, Late Night with the Devil was a great, really fun watch. It's just a really great time. So, second place goes to Let Me In Now, and It Can Be Nice, because it's none other than Longlegs. So Longlegs was my #1 slot for most of the year since I saw it, to the point where it was my Halloween costume this year. But yeah, Longlegs was an absolute blast. I probably have watched it like 4 or 5 times since I saw it in the theater. And it's one of those movies that I just can't get enough of. It's definitely similar to Silence of the Lambs or Seven, because it is that sort of FBI agent tracking down a serial killer, but it has a much more like foreboding, atmospheric, slow burn, tense, anxious dread to it than those other movies, which I think is Osgood Perkins' sort of trademark at this point. Micah Monroe does a great job playing this FBI agent who is, she's totally driven, trying to track down Longlegs, who has done the series of birthday murders, which this was another movie that had some cool marketing. It was like a 1990s style website about the birthday murders. Now, I can't speak any more about Longlegs without, of course, talking about Nicolas Cage, because my God, was it the greatest performance ever? Like, maybe he was completely unrecognizable, as I'm just saying what everyone else has already said at that point, but he was so good in this movie. Like, that alone just made it for me. I loved everything about Longlegs. I think most specifically I loved the performances. I loved the atmospheric tone of everything. And even though at the end of the day, you could say it's just sort of a generic, like Silence of the Lambs style thriller, it was just done so incredibly well that that's why it held such a high slot for me. Like I said, like #1 up until basically literally the end. Until I saw my #1 film of the year, which was Nosferatu. This one I was all in for from the time I read that it was even happening, because I am all in for anything Robert Eggers touches. I love The Witch. I love The Lighthouse. I love The Northman, even though you could say that's not really horror. And yes, Nosferatu did not disappoint me at all. I thought it was an absolutely beautiful gothic horror masterpiece. The original Nosferatu came out in 1922, F.W. Murnau, where it was basically just like a bootleg version of Dracula. So much so that I recently learned that apparently Bram Stoker's widow sued F.W. Murnau for making Nosferatu, which I thought was pretty funny. So Nosferatu is just a retelling of Dracula, right? And then since the 1922 Nosferatu was made, Werner Herzog did a version of it in the 1970s where Klaus Kinski played Count Orlok. So the general premise of Nosferatu is, of course, Thomas Hutter is a young lawyer trying to make it at this firm, and he has to go across the Carpathian Mountains to seal this real estate deal with the mysterious Count Orlok. He's recently married to Ellen, who has to stay behind with his friends while he goes away. Count Orlok, or Dracula, has his own set of intentions with Ellen. But yeah, on top of it just being absolutely stunningly gorgeous, like the cinematography, the color grading, all of those aspects of the film were 100% on point. And the performances were great. Lily Rose Depp, this was the first time I've seen her in a role where I really feel like she was able to show her acting chops. She absolutely nailed this performance. It was awesome watching her on screen. Willem Dafoe, his performance as the mad scientist guy was great as usual. Of course, my favorite Robert Eggers Willem Dafoe performance will always be The Lighthouse. Like, I don't see how you can get any better than that.
Went mad, he did.
Willem Dafoe was great. Aaron Taylor Johnson was great. Nicholas Hoult was great. And of course, how could I forget Count Orlok, played by Bill Skarsgård, to an unrecognizable quality. He was absolutely haunting. The voice that he did for Count Orlok, I thought had to be digitally altered or manipulated in some way, but evidently it wasn't. It's so spooky. And then you just have to ask yourself, who's scarier, Pennywise the Clown or Count Orlok? If you're into gothic horror, Dracula, if you like Robert Eggers' previous work, then definitely check out Nosferatu. It was my favorite movie of the year, and hopefully you'll like it too. So that does it. Those are my top 10 of 2024. I am looking forward to going in depth on a few more of these. I'll definitely be doing Nosferatu, but if there are any others from this list that you think would be of interest to you, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll be looking forward to reviewing movies and horror books in 2025. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you next time at the Black Cat Archives. All right, that's it. Goodbye.